Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever asked yourself why it seems that the women with the deepest faith, the warmest hearts, and the strongest spirits often face the fiercest storms? Why the very daughters of God who love the hardest, pray the longest, and serve the most seem to wrestle with the greatest struggles? When a woman of faith finds herself facing storms that seem too fierce for her shoulders to bear, it's easy to wonder why the battles come so relentlessly. Why does the enemy press in so hard, so often, and with such cruel precision? But what if I told you that the very reason the battle rages so intensely around you is because you carry something holy inside you, something the enemy is terrified of? You see, the devil doesn't waste his time fighting someone who poses no threat. He reserves his sharpest arrows, his most calculated attacks, for the ones carrying the greatest callings, the women whose prayers move heaven, the women whose faith, even when shaken, still clings to the promises of God, the women who don't even realize yet how dangerous they are to darkness, just by standing up and refusing to let go of hope. Deep within your spirit, God has planted a purpose bigger than your own plans. You might see yourself as ordinary, but the enemy sees the seeds of something extraordinary. He sees a woman who could speak life to the broken, whose testimony could bring healing to the hurting, whose quiet acts of faithfulness could change the course of her family for generations. And so, from the moment that calling takes root, the battle begins. The attacks aren't random. They are aimed at silencing your influence before it matures, at convincing you you are unworthy before you realize how chosen you really are. Sometimes it feels like just as you find your footing, another wave comes crashing, as if every step forward is met with 2 steps back. But understand this, the greater the purpose, the greater the pressure. Because a woman who knows her God-given identity is a threat to every lie the enemy has built. Your battle isn't just about you. It's about all those God plans to reach through you. Your words, your resilience, your love, and your story will touch lives you may never even meet. That is why the enemy works overtime to weary your soul. Look back over your life and see the pattern, the moments when you tried to rise and the weight that came to press you back down. The seasons of heartbreak, betrayal, and disappointment that tried to harden your heart, yet somehow here you still stand. Maybe bruised, maybe tired, but still believing, still hoping, still fighting. That perseverance alone is evidence of something divine at work within you. God's grace is the reason you haven't been destroyed by what came against you. And don't miss this. Every attack the enemy launches is a signpost of what he fears most about you. If he attacks your peace, it's because you're meant to be a peacemaker. If he attacks your confidence, it's because your voice carries power. If he attacks your family, it's because your legacy will change generations. The battle is brutal because the calling is beautiful. The enemy doesn't attack empty vessels. He targets those filled with promise. It's in those moments of crushing pressure, when you feel like you can't take one more blow, that God is often doing his deepest work, shaping your character, strengthening your spirit, and teaching your heart to lean completely on him. Your prayers become raw and real in the fire. Your worship becomes deeper, not because life is easy, but because you've discovered the God who walks with you through the valley. The very struggle that tried to break you becomes the soil where unshakable faith takes root. So when you ask, why me? Why is my battle so hard? Remember, it is because you matter more than you know. Your faith terrifies the darkness. Your obedience shakes the kingdom of the enemy. Your courage lights a path for others. You carry a calling that can't be measured by your circumstances. It was placed within you by the same God who called Esther to risk her life for her people, who gave Hannah strength to pray through years of heartbreak, and who turned Mary's quiet yes into the miracle of the Savior's birth. The fight you're in is fierce because what's inside you is fierce. The enemy sees what you're becoming even when you can't see it yet. And while the battle is real, so is your God. And the one who called you is faithful to finish what he started. So stand firm, even when it hurts. Pray louder when the enemy shouts. Keep loving, keep forgiving, keep believing, because the fight proves that your life has a purpose bigger than you've ever imagined. And though the battle feels overwhelming, the victory belongs to the Lord. And you, beloved daughter, are destined to walk in it. There's a truth many overlook in the middle of suffering, that God never wastes pain. Every tear that falls, every silent prayer whispered through trembling lips, every lonely night spent asking why, none of it slips through his hands unnoticed. Instead, he weaves it all into a testimony far greater than we could ever write on our own. Your deepest wounds, though they ache, are destined to become someone else's living hope. Because when God brings you through what should have destroyed you, your story carries a weight that no sermon, no textbook, no lecture could ever match. It becomes living proof that grace isn't just an idea, it's real. And it changes everything. See, many people read about faith, but few truly see it lived out. And that's why your scars matter. The enemy tries to convince you that your pain disqualifies you, that your mistakes define you, or that your broken places make you unusable by God. But the exact opposite is true. Those broken places become windows through which God's light shines the brightest. People who've only known comfort can speak about hope. But a woman who has walked through the valley and still lifts her eyes to heaven embodies it. She becomes a living sermon that preaches louder than words ever could. Your pain, as raw as it feels, is the seedbed of compassion. It softens your heart to see the suffering in others, to offer kindness where others might offer judgment, to extend grace because you know what it feels like to desperately need it. That's why God often uses those who've been crushed to lift others up, because it isn't theory to them, it's testimony. When you say, I've been there and God brought me through, it carries an authority that can break chains. People can argue theology, but they can't argue your story. And think about it. Your testimony doesn't start after the pain ends. It's being written right now in the middle of your questions, in the nights when you choose to pray instead of give up, in the days you keep loving even when your heart feels heavy. Those moments speak louder than any polished words ever could, because they show that faith isn't the absence of struggle. It's trusting God in the middle of it. Someone watching your life will find courage to keep going because they see you refuse to quit. God can take what you thought was the end of you and turn it into the beginning of ministry. The heartbreak that almost crushed you can become the reason you can speak life into someone else who thinks they won't survive theirs. The betrayal that shattered your trust can make you an advocate for those whose voices feel silenced. The season when you felt unseen can help you notice the overlooked, the lonely, and the hurting. In God's hands, nothing is wasted. Every broken piece can become part of a masterpiece that points back to Him. And maybe you're still in the middle of the story. Maybe the pain feels fresh and hope feels far away, but even now, God is at work. He's shaping your heart, deepening your faith, and preparing you to speak from a place of authenticity. When healing comes, and it will, you'll look back and see how far He's brought you. And you'll find yourself speaking life to someone else, saying, I know how it feels, but hold on, because God is faithful. And your words won't just be comforting, they'll be a lifeline, because they come from someone who truly understands. Sometimes the very thing you beg God to remove becomes the very thing he uses to open doors you never imagined. It could be a ministry born out of your struggle, friendships forged in shared sorrow, or an unexpected strength that surprises even you. You see, it's often the places of our deepest pain that God uses to write the most powerful parts of our story. Because people are not drawn to perfection, they're drawn to honesty, to vulnerability, to someone willing to say, me too, but look what God did. When you look at your scars, don't see them as proof of defeat. See them as proof you survived. They're reminders of grace, resilience, and redemption. And every time you share them, you break the silence that shame tries to create. You remind others that it's okay to struggle, that it's possible to heal, and that God is near to the brokenhearted. So yes, your pain has purpose. Your tears water seeds of hope in hearts you may never even know you've touched. Your journey with all its ups and downs becomes a living testimony that God still heals, still restores, and still brings beauty from ashes. And in that way, your suffering, redeemed by his love, becomes the very thing that sets someone else free. Faith is a beautiful word when life feels gentle, but its real power is revealed only when everything starts to shake. It's easy to say, I trust God when the bills are paid, when loved ones are healthy, and when doors swing open with little effort. But true unshakable faith is forged in places where comfort is stripped away, when prayers seem to hang unanswered in the silence, and when you stand face to face with fear, heartbreak, or uncertainty. It's there in the furnace of suffering that faith moves from being something you talk about to something that sustains you. And that faith can't be taught by mere words or learned from a book. It must be lived through seasons that test every ounce of who you are. God sometimes allows us to walk through battles that seem too fierce for one simple reason: to build a faith that's not swayed by changing circumstances. A faith that clings to his promises even when the evidence around us seems to suggest otherwise. In those moments when your strength feels spent, when the tears won't stop, and when every logical part of you whispers that it's over, something sacred happens if you choose to hold on just a little longer. You discover that your faith was never meant to rest on feelings, on what your eyes can see. Instead, it becomes anchored in the character of God himself, the one who is unchanging, faithful, and true, even when life feels anything but. It is in those hardest moments, when the ground beneath your feet seems to crumble, that faith takes root deep in your soul. Faith that says, I don't understand, but I still trust. Faith that whispers, even if he doesn't answer the way I hope, he is still good. That kind of faith becomes immovable because it has been tested and proven in the fire. The kind of faith that can comfort a hurting friend, not with shallow words, but from a place of understanding. The kind of faith that allows you to stand firm, even when others around you crumble under the weight of life's storms. The truth is, shallow faith can only survive shallow waters. But you, chosen daughter of God, are being prepared to sail deeper seas. God doesn't leave you in the fire to burn. He keeps you there just long enough for the impurities of fear, doubt, and pride to be burned away, so that what remains is something pure, priceless, and unbreakable. Just as gold must pass through the fire to be refined, so your faith grows stronger through every test. What you once questioned, you will declare boldly. What once made you anxious will soon become the very area where you testify of God's peace. Think back to the moments you thought would break you completely. Somehow, you're still here. Your heart may carry scars, your tears may have fallen like rain, but you also discovered that His grace truly is sufficient. Each trial added another layer of trust, another reminder that even in the valley, He never left you. Those seasons of darkness didn't destroy your faith, they deepened it. They transformed it from borrowed words into a living, breathing trust that cannot be shaken by circumstance. When others see your faith, they may not know the nights you spent praying through tears, the moments of wrestling with doubt, or the quiet surrender that came when you had nothing left to offer but your broken hallelujah. But God saw it all. And what He was building in secret becomes a strength that will be revealed in the open. Because unshakable faith isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet, steadfast, and unwavering, even when tested by the fiercest wind. And here's something beautiful. Faith forged in suffering doesn't just hold you up, it becomes a refuge for others. When they see you standing firm, even when your world has been shaken, they see what real faith looks like. They find hope that maybe they too can hold on. Your story becomes proof that faith is not the absence of pain, but the presence of God in the middle of it. So when you wonder why the battle is so hard, remember this: God is building in you a faith that can withstand any storm, a faith that will stand not just for your sake, but so others might see and know that He is faithful even in the valley. Through every tear, every test, and every moment of surrender, your faith is becoming something unshakable, not because of who you are, but because of who He is. And that, dear soul, is worth every battle you face. There comes a time in every believer's life when they face something so overwhelming that it strips away every illusion of control. A sickness that doctors can't fix. A betrayal so deep it leaves you gasping for air. A prayer that seems to go unanswered for years. It's in those moments that God gently shows us something profound. The victory that's coming won't be credited to your own strength, your own wisdom, or your own ability. It will be so evident, so undeniable that only one conclusion can remain. This had to be God. Because when He allows battles that feel too big for our own hands to win, it is often so that His power, not ours, becomes the headline of the story. It goes against every instinct we have. We want to fix things, control outcomes, and lean on what we know or who we know. But God, in His mercy, sometimes leads us into situations where our resources, our connections, and even our strongest qualities simply aren't enough. That is where true dependence is born. And in that place of brokenness and surrender, His strength steps in to do what we never could. The walls fall, not because we shouted the loudest, but because His hand brought them down. The chains break, not because we struggled the hardest, but because He spoke freedom over us. And it's in that moment that our story becomes living evidence that He still moves mountains. There is a quiet, humbling beauty in realizing that we are not the heroes of our own stories. We're not called to be. Instead, we become living testimonies to the one who is. The wounds we thought disqualified us become the very places where His power shines through. The moments when we felt too weak to go on become the proof that His grace really is sufficient. People who watch our lives won't say, "Look how strong she is." They'll say, "Look how faithful God has been to her." And that difference matters, because it means the hope we offer others isn't in ourselves, but in a God who can do the impossible. Think about it. If every victory in your life could be traced back to your own talent, intelligence, or connections, where would God's glory be? But when you can point to moments and say, I didn't know how, but he made a way, it becomes a testimony that no one can argue with. Your life becomes evidence that God still works miracles in ordinary people, in impossible situations, in hearts that simply refuse to stop trusting him, even when they don't understand. There's a sacred courage that grows when you realize the outcome doesn't depend on you. You keep praying not because your prayer is perfect, but because you trust in the one who hears. You keep showing love not because it always makes sense, but because you know it's his love flowing through you. And when breakthrough finally comes, it will be so clear that it wasn't your cleverness or your effort that made it happen. It was him. All him. And that kind of story doesn't just build your faith, it builds the faith of everyone around you. They watch and see someone who faced what should have destroyed her, yet still stood, still praised, still loved. And when the answer came, they saw that it had to be God because the odds were impossible, the pain was too deep, the wait was too long. And yet victory came. That's when your life becomes a living sermon, not about your strength, but about his. Some of the most powerful testimonies are born from situations where you had no choice but to lean completely on God, where you had nothing left to give except your trust, where all your plans fell apart and all you had was your faith. And when he steps in and does what only he can, your story becomes undeniable proof that he is still working, still fighting for his children, and still turning what the enemy meant for evil into good. So if you find yourself in a battle that feels too big, don't see it as punishment. See it as an opportunity for God to show himself mighty on your behalf. Trust that what looks like an impossible situation may be the very place where he wants to reveal his glory. Not so people will talk about your strength, but so they'll talk about his goodness, his faithfulness, and his power. Because in the end, the most powerful testimony isn't about what we can do, but what God has done through us, in spite of us, and sometimes even without us understanding how. Your story is being written in a way that when others read it, they won't say, she's so strong. They'll say, God is so good. And that, more than anything, is what makes the battle worth it. There are battles in life that feel too heavy for one person to carry. Struggles that seem to come out of nowhere and linger far longer than we think we can stand. And sometimes, without fully realizing it, a woman finds herself fighting not just for her own peace, but for the freedom and healing of those who came before her and those who will come after. Because there are times when God chooses a person, often a woman with a willing heart, to stand in the gap and break chains that have bound her family line for generations. It's a quiet, often unseen calling to say, no more. This ends with me. And that's why the battle feels so heavy. It isn't just about your own life. It's about rewriting the story for everyone connected to you. There are patterns that run through families like rivers: fear, addiction, shame, silence, cycles of broken relationships or hidden pain. They often seem impossible to stop because they've flowed for so long. But God, in his wisdom, often raises up one woman to step into that flow and stand against it. You might feel the weight of anxiety that you can't explain, face struggles that others in your family never confronted, or feel driven to pray and fight spiritually in ways you never saw modeled growing up. That isn't coincidence. It's calling. It's God trusting you to carry something heavy, because the victory will cover more than just your own life. When you face opposition that feels unreasonably strong, when the pressure feels constant and the cost feels high, it's often because the impact of your faithfulness will ripple out further than you can see. God isn't just thinking about you, He's thinking about your children, your nieces and nephews, even generations yet unborn. You may never see the full harvest of the seeds you're planting now, but heaven sees, and the enemy sees too, which is why the attacks feel so personal and persistent. Because if he can discourage you, he can keep those chains in place. But if you keep standing, even when you feel weak, God will use your faithfulness to break what others thought could never be broken. It's a lonely road sometimes to be the one who chooses forgiveness when bitterness feels easier, to speak hope when the family language has always been fear, to pray bold prayers when silence was the norm. But you are not alone in that place. Heaven sees every act of faith no one else notices, every prayer whispered through tears, every time you chose love over anger, every moment you kept going when giving up would have been simple. And while it feels hidden now, God is building a legacy through you that darkness cannot erase. Sometimes the enemy will try to convince you that you're not making a difference, that nothing is changing. But that is a lie born of fear. Because even small steps of obedience echo louder than you can imagine. Your children watch you pray and learn where to run when life hurts. Your words of hope plant seeds in hearts that have only known despair. Your decision to speak truth breaks a cycle of silence. These moments may look ordinary, but in the spiritual realm, they're acts of war, pushing back darkness that has claimed territory in your family for far too long. And know this, God never asked you to carry the weight alone. What feels too heavy for you was never meant to be borne by your strength. It's his spirit within you that empowers, sustains, and guides you. And in your weakest moments, when you feel like you can't stand another day, he becomes your strength. That too is part of the testimony. It isn't about your perfection, but about your dependence on him. The woman chosen to break generational chains often feels out of place, misunderstood, and weary from the fight. But remember, being chosen doesn't mean being the strongest or the loudest. It means being willing to trust God's voice over the noise of the past, willing to keep believing for healing, even when the wounds run deep, willing to carry faith into places that have known nothing but fear. And because of that willingness, God will do through you what no human effort alone ever could. So yes, your battle feels heavier, because its impact is greater. You may see only the pain and struggle now, but heaven sees the future generations who will walk freer because of your stand. And one day, whether here on earth or in eternity, you'll see the chains that lay broken at your feet, not just your own, but those that bound your family for years. And it will become clear that what felt like too great a burden was actually a holy assignment. To be the one God trusted to say, it ends with me. It can feel cruel sometimes the way life unfolds for those whose hearts are sincere and whose faith is strong. A woman who prays daily and loves deeply finds herself walking through valleys darker than she ever imagined. She faces betrayal she never expected, loss that feels unbearable, and disappointments that leave her questioning everything she thought she knew. And in those moments, it's easy to see hardship as punishment, to believe the struggle must mean God is displeased or distant. But what feels like punishment is so often preparation, because God in his wisdom and love refines his strongest daughters through the hardest seasons, not to break them, but to prepare them for something greater than they could have carried before. From the outside, it doesn't make sense. Why would a loving God allow his beloved daughters to face such fierce battles? Why would he watch them weep on their knees, begging for relief that sometimes seems delayed? The answer is not because he delights in your suffering, but because he sees beyond what you can see. He knows what is coming and he knows what it will require. The very weight of your calling demands strength forged in the fires of experience, compassion born from shared pain, and faith that's unshaken by circumstances. Without the breaking, the vessel can't hold what he plans to pour out. Preparation looks like loss when all you feel is emptiness. It looks like closed doors when all you see are missed opportunities. It looks like unanswered prayers when all you hear is silence. But beneath the surface, God is carving deeper wells in your spirit so you can hold more of his grace, his wisdom, and his power. He is stripping away what you thought you needed so that you stand anchored in him alone. And though it feels like death to your plans and dreams, it becomes life for a testimony that will speak to hearts in ways your comfort never could. The strongest women in faith didn't become pillars of hope by living easy lives. Their authority was not born in moments of applause, but in nights of wrestling with God, in days when all they could offer was a broken hallelujah. Their words carry weight because they've lived what they speak. Their love feels safe because it has survived deep wounds and chosen forgiveness. Their faith inspires because it was tested in darkness and still chose light. And you too are being shaped into that kind of woman. Not through comfort, but through seasons that demand surrender, trust, and perseverance. When you look back, you'll see it. The prayers you wouldn't have prayed if life had been easy. The strength you didn't know you had until you were forced to stand. The peace that makes no sense except for the fact that it came straight from God's hand. And you'll see how each heartbreak taught you compassion, each disappointment taught you humility, and each delay taught you patience. Preparation often looks like breaking because it breaks the pride, fear, and false security that would keep you from fully walking in what God has planned. This isn't to say the pain isn't real. It is. God doesn't dismiss your tears. He catches every one. He doesn't downplay your confusion or exhaustion. He walks with you through it. But he also loves you too much to leave you unprepared for what's ahead. Because when the time comes for you to speak life into someone else's valley, to lead where others fear, or to stand when the winds blow hardest, you'll do so not from theory, but from testimony. And that testimony will carry power because it was born in fire. What feels like punishment is often his protection too. You don't see the traps ahead, the relationships that would have derailed your purpose, or the opportunities that would have looked like blessings but were really distractions. God sees it all, and in his preparation, he sometimes says no or not yet, not to hurt you, but to save you for something better. Trust becomes real when you choose to believe his heart, even when you don't understand his hand. Preparation also teaches you to depend fully on him. As long as life feels manageable, it's easy to trust yourself, your plans, or your strength. But when you face what you cannot fix, survive what you cannot explain, and still found hope on the other side, you come to know God not just as an idea, but as your anchor. And that knowledge, deep, lived, and unshakable, is what equips you for the calling ahead. You may not see it now, but every tear waters seeds of future purpose. Every unanswered prayer becomes a chapter in a story that will comfort someone else. Every season of silence builds a faith that won't crumble when tested. What feels like punishment isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to prepare you, refine you, and set you apart. Because what God is preparing for you and through you is far greater than anything comfort alone could have created. And when the time comes, you realize you were never being punished. You were being lovingly prepared to carry something holy